take them to a great local lender and say, this is what the builder's offering. Can you compete with that to be able to give them great service and a great program? So that's my plug for local lenders and in particular, Rachel. I've worked with Rachel more years than I can count. She's my go-to. She has never failed me, never not closed a home for me. The other thing I say is if she says it can be done, it can be done. If she says it can't be done, it can't be done. It's gonna save you time. So Rachel, and Dawn is her sidekick back here. As Rachel's the face, Dawn's the word. So I'm gonna let Rachel tell you about some of their programs, and then we're gonna dive into buyers.
Well, my name is Rachel May. I am regional president over the American Eagle Mortgage Division of Cross Country Mortgage. So myself and my team, we've been together for decades, 3+ decades. So I started when I was 19 and get ready to celebrate my 32nd year in the business. So through the years, I've held every job, and I think that's what makes me unique to other loan officers in the industry is I have actually held my PE and my SAR with the federal government. I actually still have those active. I have managed one of the biggest underwriting teams in the city. So I have a vast underwriting experience. So when your client comes to me, we have that file nailed down. So your pre-approval is gold. Unless your client goes out and buys a Porsche, and I always say that because I had a client do that. And his Porsche payment was more than his house payment. Unless they do something silly, quit their job or something, we're closing that loan no matter what. If I give you my stamp and I give you my approval letter, we're getting it closed. And I can promise you, Kathy, in the 30 years that we've worked together, she has never had to stand on my doorstep to get a loan done. So that's a good thing. I'm with Cross Country Mortgage now. That's my parent company. We still have the mom and pop feel of American Eagle Mortgage. I have a local group here that I work with that Don and I are the top producers here in the area. We offer anything from OPA, Ohio Housing Down Payment Assistance loans, to bank statement and DSCR loans. And we do those all fast. We do them easy, and we do them painless for you and your client. We work 7 days a week to make sure that we're available. So my hours in specific are 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week, so that I can make sure I'm there for your buyers, make sure I'm running numbers before they write that offer, make sure I call the listing agent before you submit the offer to let them know that I have a fully approved borrower, actually already through underwriting, we just need a house. Oftentimes, we can close our deals in 10 business days. That's how we're winning our deals right now. So this month, Don and I are closing 7 million in production, and the bulk of that is closing in 15 days or less. So it does not, and that includes our OPA loans, just so you know. OPA loans, you need 2 weeks. That's just because OPA is really slow. But even our bank statement loans, Don had one closed in 9 business days. So we know how to get the business done. We know how to do it fast, but I just wanted to touch base on a few of our specialty products that we do. First and foremost, OPA, we are, me personally, I have done more Ohio housing loans in my career than any other lender out there. So that is my baby. I've been known as the OPA queen for a long time. I sat on their board. So it's something that I've loved throughout my career. I will tell you, I was just talking to Kathy about it. We're using it a little bit less right now. I'm not sure if you guys are privy to the changes that happened to OPA recently, but OPA used to give you 5% down payment assistance. They just changed that. They just changed that to where if it's conventional, you get max 3%. And if it's government, you get max 3.5%. And that will cover your down payment assistance on each one of those programs, but it doesn't cover their closing costs. So their closing costs, if you don't get seller assistance, will take up 1.5% of that. Okay. So we don't do as much OPA as we used to, but it is there if you can find a seller who's going to pay a good amount of closing costs. But we do have proprietary down payment assistance products too. And that's what we use the most. We use our Smart Start program, which gives you 2% of your down payment. So if you're a first time homeowner and you're putting 3% down, we'll give you 2% up to 2% of that up to $4,000. And then that you don't have to repay that. So it's not like OPA. It's not going to stick with that property for 7 years. They could move out of that property in 12 months and rent it, or they could sell it in 6 months and there's no repayment on that. So that is very good because most down payment assistance programs have a recapture, have a repayment. So we try to use that one as much as we can, since we are going to be in a refinance period in the next 12 to 18 months. We don't want people to buy a house, get down payment assistance, only to have to then Can I refi? Do I have enough equity? Because now I have to pay off the second mortgage. So we try to use that proprietary program more than anything. And then we often pair that with the mortgage tax credit. Are you guys familiar with the mortgage tax credit program? Okay, so mortgage tax credit is through the state of Ohio, first time homeowner or a targeted area. And you get a 15% of your interest tax credit, and you get that year for year as long as you have interest on the house. So for your, we were closing one Friday, and their credit's gonna be $3,600 extra a year. So if his payment's only $2,300, I'm making a payment for him with that tax credit money. Not only that, I can then take that 3,600 divided by 12 and use it as income. So if you have a borrower who's approved for 300, but boy, didn't they fall in love with that house at 310. That tax credit helps us get them qualified for that, because we can give them $300 more in income based off that tax credit. So we are the #1 lender to use that tax credit as well. A lot of times, we don't even tell our buyer we're giving it to them. Don and I pay the $500 fee, and we just surprise them at closing, I hear the tax credit certificate, it's yours. Here's that extra free money that you didn't even know about. So we try to get every perk that we can for your buyer. Obviously, we do the VA, the FHA, the USDA, the agency.
So who is your buyer for the tax program that you're talking about?
Who would be the client for that? Your first time homeowner, or if they're buying in a targeted area. So if they're buying in probably an area that they're trying to, like Hilltop, Franklinton, things like that, even if they're not a first time home buyer, they can still qualify for that money. So they don't always have, and if they're a veteran, you don't have to be a first time homeowner for any of those products, just so you know, the veterans exempt. So that is a great question.
Is that an income-based area or a minority-based area on that side? For the tax credit?
Income.
And what is that income for that limit?
Right now, most of the areas in central Ohio, it's right around 105,000. Yep, right around 100. So that's pretty generous.
So like 100% of the average?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. So, I mean, and that changes per area, believe it or not, Union County, for some odd reason that OPA cannot explain to me, has the highest income limits out there. So that's a pretty popular area with Marysville and Plain City and all those out there, so we utilize that product a lot. And it is income based, but they are very generous on their income limits for that. Good question. But as I was saying, not only do we do those ordinary products, the VA, the FHA, the USDA, the agency, but we also do the non-QM products. Non-QM is your bank statement loan, it's your 1099 program, it's your DSCR program, which is probably our most popular for investors, especially agents that are investors. We use the DSCR a lot for them when they're purchasing their investment.
That's where I was going, was the DSCR and how someone qualifies for DSCR.
So DSCR, actually, we can go down to 620 credit score. 20% down, and that's even if it's multifamily, up to 4 units. And how you qualify is based on the rent that is assigned by the appraiser when he does the appraisal. So as long as that rent covers the mortgage payment, you're good. Even if it doesn't, we can go down to 75% coverage. There is a pricing hit or maybe a prepayment penalty, a small one on something like that. But we do have exceptions for every loan program, especially the DSCR. So it doesn't have to exactly cover the full payment. We do have a way to go down to 75% of that.
Is that current rent or what rents are going for? What?
In the area, just rents that are in the area. Absolutely. Yeah. And I can tell you, we have done an amazing amount of DSCR. We've never not been able to make it work because of that. We have great exceptions on that, just so you know. We did one $1.2 million in Hocking Hills. And he put 20% down and he qualified, and now he's making a lot of money. That rents for like $15,000 a week.
He doesn't have to show a certain amount of cash flow or anything, he's self-employed.
We don't care about that. We don't even ask for the
Just
work, what we
20%.
do, nothing. Well, and actually, depending on when that appraisal comes in, sometimes we can come back to you and say, hey, you only have to put 15% down if you want to. I would say 20, because there's that caveat for 15. But once you tell somebody 15% down, and then have to say, oops, getting 20. So I tell everyone 20, and then if I could back it up to 15, I do. And
Do they have to already own a property, or can this be their first, like?
it can be their first.
Okay.
They prefer landlord experience, they prefer you to have some sort of, but We make exceptions for that. The guy who did the 1,000,002 property, he never had landlord experience. So yes, we make exceptions for that. Now, if you're a 620 credit score. And the DSCR comes in at 75, well, you know, maybe we'll ask for more reserves if you're not, if you don't have landlord experience, but my team, they're really good about making exceptions. So like I said, I've never not been able to close one.
The other thing I want to touch on with Rachel, and this is important too, is your loan officer is great. And one of my difficulties in my career is that there's so many great loan officers out there. They really are, and you wish you could just give them all business. But really, the key to closing a loan is the underwriter. Am I correct? I mean, first of all, it's a loan officer who understands what an underwriter is going to look for. I've had many times experience where I had an incredibly nice, friendly loan officer, but they were not experienced enough to know what the gatekeeper was gonna say. And so 3 days before closing, we have stuff thrown at us that an experienced loan officer should have caught. They should have seen that coming down the road. And one of the things, and you might want to speak to this, Rachel, is the underwriter is literally down the hall from you. Like, so if whatever, and which, by the way, is another reason why I don't like working with banks that are out of state, is because that underwriter is someone I don't know. You can't generally talk to personally, and really has no vested interest in making Kathy Cairo happy. I'm not gonna send them more business, so they don't care. Whereas if you establish a good local lender, someone who knows and whose underwriter is not only in Columbus, but in the building, right? I mean, in
Not only that, but they all used to report to me as their manager.
yeah, so
they know,
she knows what the underwriters look at.
they know if I send a file in, they won't deny my loan. They'll call me and say, hey, what were you thinking? We'll talk it out and then we move over. So we just don't get loans tonight. And the other thing is, you're right, Kathy, if you're working with someone like Rocket or somebody like that, not saying anything bad about them, but they can't text their underwriter, their chief underwriter on a Saturday night at 7 o'clock to say, hey, this is a weird property. What do you think about it? This is a VA. What do you think about this? You know, this condition. Do you think this outbuilding, if the appraiser gives it no value, we can move past, even though it's got chipping and peeling paint? Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you. So when you call me on the weekend or you call me in the evening and you're asking about a property specific, I normally know the answer. But if I don't, I have the chief underwriter that works with me because my underwriters are sales based. So they work really well with the sales force. Unlike most companies, our underwriters encourage our loan officers to call. So we do have a great relationship. Well, we've been together for 30 years, so we better.
Well, you guys have Rachel and Dawn's information. Again, some of you especially are new. If you are saying, hey, you know, I want a loan officer or someone I can depend on and also learn from. One of the things I tell you guys to do, if you're not busy in your business, that means you have time. You should be using that time to educate yourself, meeting with people, meeting with your title companies, meeting with loan officers. Come with a list of questions. They're better than AI, okay? When you come with your list of questions and say, look, these are things that I have faced, these are things I don't understand, these are things that I need, questions answered. That's what you should be spending your time doing. We're gonna talk in a minute about the value you bring as a buyer's agent. Now that we have to sell that value to get paid, what is the value you bring? Well, one of the biggest value propositions you have is your knowledge. Your ability to offer solutions to problems because of your knowledge, because of what you know. You have a buyer who doesn't have down payment. Well, you now have knowledge of this available. That's what makes you valuable. So take time to do your research, get some good lenders behind you, and begin to depend on them. Get to know them, because they're going to be your biggest asset. Thanks. Thanks.
And anyone who'd like to schedule a one-on-one, give me a call. I'd love to take you to coffee or lunch. Some of you I've worked with in the room, would love to work with you again. So just give me a call. Give me a call anytime. I'll come to you. Don and I'll come to you. We'll bring you a treat or meet you somewhere and pick my brain. I love educating. So any questions you have, we'll be here to answer.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
Okay,
Guys.
Okay, who in this room has a listing right now? Who has listings? Okay, I'm gonna start with you right up here, Bob. tell me what's going on your end on listings. What are you seeing? What are you seeing in the market?
It's definitely fewer buyer showings. They're pickier. Sellers are starting to get a little frustrated, even though we told them, this, you know, the market's not the same. This is what's happening. They still are frustrated because they're not moving and the neighbors sold last year in 3 days.
Right, thank you. That makes me feel so much better. Dave, same thing? What are you hearing? You got your listings? What's going on?
I've never seen more price reductions in the past
There you go.
6 months than I have in the past 6 years. Like it's. And the comps are there, but the market has shifted so
Right.
much that it's not supported by what happened last year.
Very good. Anybody else have listings? So tell me from a listing perspective, what's going on?
Well, what I've noticed that a couple of people that I've been working with is that they come in with a preconceived notion of what they want to list it for, even though you present everything
Yeah.
to them and you have, you know, the comps and you, say, this is where I think we can be. Let's talk about this, and they're $30,000 higher than
Right.
that, but this is what people I've heard or talked to before think
Right.
it's worth. So, you know, it's like, they don't have no facts to it, they're just
Yeah.
gonna have an idea of what they've heard over the last couple of years.
Sure. Well, that's a whole nother class, preparing sellers in this market. But the reason I asked these people are listing agents is I want you to know as buyers agents that we are all looking at it like, I truly have had a few listings that I went back to check the MLS to make sure they were in there. Because I thought, based on the quality of the listing, based on the pricing, based on that we would have 5 showings over a weekend and crickets, nothing. And just as these gentlemen have said, looking at price reductions for the first time. And let me, as a buyer's agent, let me tell you what I'm hearing. I am showing homes day 1 and day 2 on the market, and the listing agent has in the information, no escalation clauses, give us 3 days to respond. All the language we used to hear when it was automatic that they had multiple offers. Then Monday morning, that listing agent's calling me. So do you think your guy has any interest? Do you think? So again, have we ever seen that in 10 years? No, we've never, we can't get listing agents to call us back, much less proactively call us to see if we have a buyer and if that buyer is interested. So the reason I bring that to your attention, the reason for this class is it's a brand new world. It's a brand new world. And for some of you, if you've not been in the business for 10 years, you've not sold in this world. You know, for so long, we have written offers, sitting down and saying, what does the seller want? And that's been normal to us. That's been normal to say, what can I throw in here to make the seller happy? You know, I believe our team was one of the first teams literally 10 years ago to put offer instructions in the MLS. And I remember a couple buyers agents just calling me saying, how dare you tell us how to write offers? How dare you tell us that we have to do this, this, and this? Well, 5 years in, everybody's doing it, you know, because as listing agents, we got tired of listening to the same questions over and over again. So it just became easier to tell you as buyers agents what the seller wants. How odd is that? One day we're going to look back and say, did we really do that? Did we really put the language in there to tell the buyer's agent how to write an offer on our listings? Well, that's the market we've been in. And so your instructions to your buyers have been, it doesn't matter what you want. It doesn't matter what you think you can do or don't have money for. This is what you have to do to get this house. I mean, I even wrote a little book about it. I mean, these are all the things you have to do. Read them. If you can't do them, this is not your market to buy a house. Well, what we're seeing now is we're slowly seeing this move back to more of a normal market. Now, what's really odd, and again, you're always learning in this, it's brand new to me, is there is still a supply and demand imbalance. We still only have 5,000 and 5,441 to be exact homes on the market when we should have 13 to 15,000. So you scratch your head and you say, well, it's still supply and demand is off, but why do we have listings sitting out there? Well, there's a myriad of reasons. Some of my reasons, I go back to the recession reason, which is consumer confidence. I think we have really shaky consumer confidence right now, meaning is the buyer sure they're going to have their job? Or what are the effects of tariffs? You know, are we going to see interest rates? What are we going to see happen? So you have a lot of buyers holding back. But to Bob's point, what I'm hearing on listings is, buyers are much more slowly making decisions. They're realizing that the home they look at on Friday will probably still be there on Monday. So they're much slower making decisions. They're much pickier. They're much more cautious. And they are more likely to wait for the next house. We're seeing more homes come on the market. We have 1,000 more homes on the market today than we did a year ago. So we're seeing more homes come on the market. So they're much more likely to say, well, it's a nice house and it's okay, but we'll wait for the next one to come on the market. And so what that opens up for you as a buyer's agent is a whole lot of opportunity that you didn't have 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over our purchase contract, just the points that apply to your buyer, and we're going to talk about the things that you can now do that were not available to you 5 years ago. So picking up this sheet right here that says Columbus Realtors purchase contract, let's start with the simple thing, with price, okay? With the purchase price, now let me tell you, it is not 2010. Okay, so it's not a market where you automatically come in and can make any choice you want. You need one of these.
Yeah, sorry, leave that spot.
There you go. How many do you need?
I'll pay 4 or 5.
Here. One. Here's the extras. There you go. So you start with price. Now, I'm gonna walk you through what I do when I talk to buyers. When I go see a new listing, okay, brand new listing, and they really like it, I have to still say, this home may be gone on Monday. I mean, it might, because we are still seeing some homes sell quickly. We're still seeing multiple offers, but I would say 2, not 12, multiple offers. We're still seeing that. So this is where you have to operate with a crystal ball with your buyers. You have to tell them, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, it's day 1 on the market. If you make an offer between now, I'm going to pretend we're looking on a Thursday, okay? If you're going to make an offer between now and Monday, yes, you still probably need to do list price. We may want to throw in an escalation clause. Some of the leftover remnants of the old market are still there, okay? So that what I say to them is, look, you need to ask yourself, what's more important? Getting this house or getting negotiation room? If you like this house, but it's really a 7 out of 10, but you would be okay if we wake up Monday morning and it is gone, then let's wait till Monday morning. Okay, but if you would look and compare every house we look at from now until Jesus comes back and say we should have bought that house, then you're still playing the game of potentially competitive offers and things like that. Now, once we roll over into Monday, well, then I make a phone call to the agent. Do you have any interest in this home? They may tell me no. Well, I had someone saying they were making an offer, but we don't have anything. Now we go back to our buyer and say, okay, I still think it needs to be competitive. Because remember, what triggers multiple offers? An offer. Yeah. One offer triggers multiple offers. So I had a client last week before last make an offer on a home that was not even on the market yet. And so we made an offer, and the next day I get a call from a realtor saying we have multiple offers. And my buyer said, how'd that happen? It's not even on the market. And I said, because you're not the only one asking about that house. And the realtor did what I would do, and that is call everybody and say, I know we're not even on the market, but we already have an offer in hand. So again, when you're on a day about 4 or 5, my advice to buyers is, okay, no offer on the table, but our offer may trigger an offer. So you need to still be pretty competitive in your offer. Okay. What happens when you hit day 10? It's a buyer's market. I mean, now we're back to 1996. Now we can go in and we can take every term of this contract and negotiate it, because what the market has shown that seller is that for the market today, in this neighborhood, for this price, you are overpriced. You have either gotten showings with no offer or you've gotten no showings. Either way, you are now positioned as a buyer's agent to tell your buyer, okay, now what do you want to do? Still can't lowball it, but now you don't have to offer list price. You could ask for closing costs. We can get OFA financing. We can do any one of these things because right now you have the leverage. You know, during this crazy market we've had for so many years, my mantra to buyers is, you have no leverage. You have no leverage. Your only leverage is to walk away. Are you willing to walk away? No, then you have no leverage. Okay, now 10 days on the market, that leverage is shifting. Now the buyer has leverage because nobody else wants the home. And you know, everybody else has moved on. So the first thing I say to you is to know how to educate your buyer on how the market moves and how every day is important. One thing I tell sellers is your home goes down in price every day it's on the market. I don't care if you tell me, look, we're not in a hurry. That's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Whether or not you're in a hurry, the market's going to move right past you. So again, that's why I tell buyers, every day that home is on the market gives you more leverage to ask what you will and to put in whatever the terms are that make you comfortable with this purchase. So the first thing, so again, I say wait a weekend. If they're not in love with it, if they can let it go, wait a weekend, and every day that home stays on the market buys you leverage for your buyer. The second thing I say, start bringing in escalation clauses again, okay? How many of you have read in the MLS when the listing agent says no escalation clauses? You understand why that is? Escalation clauses favor the seller, the buyer, not the seller. If I'm by the way, I've put that in, that's right on my offer instructions, no escalation clauses, okay? Because it benefits the buyer, not the seller. It is the buyer saying, I'll pay X up front, but if I have to, I'll pay X. Well, if I represent the seller, I want you to pay up here, okay? I don't care what down here is. I want the most you're willing to give my seller. That's the reason I say no escalation clauses. Okay, how many of you have ever had a buyer who wanted to use an escalation clause, but it said in the MLS, no escalation clause, and you didn't do it, okay? I'm a listing agent. You know what used to baffle me for the past 5 years? Is why any of you listen to me. Okay, do you have to follow my rules for your buyer? No, I don't care what your seller wants. If my buyer, yeah,
My issue with the escalation clauses is there's so many different ones and you get 3 or 4 on a listing, and they're
Yeah.
all different and it's all net and this.
Yes,
and
yeah.
It's just too confusing and then the seller's like, I'll take this one because they don't have that in.
yeah, okay, that's fair. But my point is, I have wondered for a decade why buyer's agents do what I tell them to do. Okay? You work for your client, not me. So whenever I would have a listing agent that said no escalation clauses and I put it in, they'd call me and say, well, we said no escalation. I said, well, in all due respect, I don't work for you. Okay? So, and you have to present. So please do that, you know? And by the way, I tell you too, I've never had a seller say no escalation clause. It's always the realtor who advises them that. So I know that the seller really doesn't care. They want the most money for their house. And if it means they have to deal with my escalation clause, they will. So the next thing I say to you is start ignoring it if realtors say no escalation clause. They're listing agents, you work for the buyer, you do what's in your buyer's best interest, and especially now where that seller is probably going to be thrilled to get any offer, even if it has an escalation clause. So if you're in that 0 to 5 day period and your buyer says, I have interest in this home, use an escalation clause. Now, a little bit of advice about, does anybody not, I'm assuming all of you know what an escalation clause is, okay? Let me tell you another thing I've learned about escalation clauses. I've got escalation clauses that say $500 over the last, those are useless, okay? If you're going to do an escalation clause, it needs to be enough money over a competing bid that not only it beats that offer in price, but it likely beats the other terms in that offer. So for example, if I have somebody who brings an offer to me and they say, we'll beat every other offer that's on the table by $500, but the other offer gave my people 30 days possession after closing at no cost, your $500 is meaningless. So a couple things, I think escalation clauses, if you're going to use them, need to be in the thousands. And the other thing I recommend you do, both on price and escalation clause, is don't stop on a 0 or a 5. Don't make it 3,000 over the other offer, make it 3,100, 3,200. Don't make your highest escalated price 475, make it 477. Why? Because everybody does 0s and 5s. So your 477 just beat out the other realtor's 475 because you went up a little bit higher. So that's just thrown in free advice. But anyway, escalation clauses, this is a great time to start using them. Because number one, it's a great middle ground if you have a buyer who likes the home, willing to go higher if they have to, but you're getting the vibe that this house may not get any offers. I had a home just over the weekend where the price of the home was $515. They liked it, and we did an escalation clause. Let's start. Are you willing to pay $515 today? Yes, we are. Okay, and are you recognizing that once we make that offer of $515, that might trigger additional offers? So if that happens, are you willing to go up to X? Yes, we are. So we put in an escalation clause. Here's another thing I did this past weekend is I had a client who looked at another home. It had been on the market, went through a home inspection, came back on the market. Any listing agent knows here, that's just the kiss of death. I mean, if you have a house that was on the market, got list price day 2, and all of a sudden it comes back on the market 10 days ago, you have lost that new listing buzz. And now you're having to explain to everybody what the home inspection said that caused the house to come back on the market. So my clients liked the home, but they didn't want to pay the price. And I think it had been on the market at that point, like 17, 18 days. So I called the listing agent, who was a very good agent. And I said to her, I'm just going to be straight with you. This is where we are. They're choosing between these two homes. If we can get your listing for X, I'll put it in writing right now. And this is a home that had come back on the market with after a home inspection. So she says, oh, no, they're never going to go for that. The original offer was list price. All this, I said, okay. She called me back and she goes, okay, they said they would take your price if your buyer would not do a home inspection, but they will send you the home inspection they have. And it was done by Linkhorn. I said, okay, so told my clients Linkhorn's a good inspector. Let's go back over to the house with the home inspection and take a look at it. And they were set, so we made our home inspection contingency contingent only on review of the home inspection at the house with a very short time frame to do that. Well, okay, so you had 2 good realtors working together. They got their home sold. My clients got 20-something thousand off their list price, didn't have to pay for a home inspection, and are satisfied with the condition. So again, that never would have happened. Never would have happened a few years ago, but you had a house sitting there, you had sellers getting nervous. And this, by the way, was an agent who had put all this language in her additional terms, telling the buyer how to make the offer, give us 48 hours, contingent on suitable housing, all this sort of stuff. Well, all of that goes out the window when you have a home that's been sitting out there 2 weeks. So it opens up more opportunity for you. Specialty financing, we just talked about that. I'll be honest with you, and any listing agent in here who listed a home in the past 10 years will tell you this. When you have a stack of 15 offers, one of the first things I do is go through and look at the financing. And if your financing is FHA, VA, OFA, anything, bam, bottom of the stack. You're going to get beat out by cash and conventional virtually every time. So what Rachel was saying, and what Bill will tell you too, is this is opening an opportunity for those buyers who need help, those buyers who need down payment assistance, those buyers that have loan programs that might take a second level of scrutiny in Cincinnati. All of those things that we didn't even look at for years, now your buyer has a place at the table. Because right now, I'm a listing agent, I have nothing on this house, I'm going to be grateful for that offer. Now, I might still check out your lender, I might still check out the program and ask a few questions, and I will advise my seller, look, this isn't the most ideal conditions, but you're not selling in the most ideal conditions. So we have a good offer, I've talked to the loan officer, it's good buyer, we don't have a choice now, unless you just want to keep your home on the market, we need to dive in with this buyer. So again, what you should be doing as buyer's agents is start educating yourself on loan opportunities that are out there. Start looking into those programs, the grants for grads, all the things that we've had in past years, but we've not been able to use. Become the expert on that. So when you have a buyer, you become the one that says, look, I'm gonna connect you with my loan officer. There's a program out there that I think will get you into a house and we can start looking. Closing costs again. We've not, one of the things too, during the market of multiple offers, buyers stopped asking for closing costs. I always thought it was funny that all these buyers finally came up with cash after all these years. But they stopped asking for closing costs in there, or if they did, my rule as a listing agent is if you're asking for closing costs, you are not as strong a buyer as the buyer who doesn't need closing costs. So once again, bottom of the pile. Well, now it's all down to what it always was, and that is math. If my seller has a $450,000 home and they tell me they won't go below 445, and I get an offer for 445 and 3,000 in closing costs, well, that's now 448, and we'll give you your closing cost. Again, it all comes down to bottom line and math. You have an opportunity now that we haven't had in 10 years, and that is to build between your loan officer and what they could get in their loan and what they need with closing costs. You can now ask for that and build it into your the price of the home. Your buyer might have to pay more. Again, it's all math. They're building it into their mortgage rather than coming up with it themselves. But you are entering an era where you can do that, whereas for years we've not even been able to do that. And then finally, over list price is no longer over list price. Even the homes that I have listed that are getting over list price are now 5 and 10 over, not 15 and 20 over. We're just not seeing people, they are now spending 7% money, not 3% money, and they're aware of it. So they're just not as well, and I'll ask some of you, same, I mean, you're hearing that, even over list price is not 25 and 30,000 over, it's 5 or 10 over. So when you're advising your buyers, again, no crystal ball, you don't know, but we are no longer in an environment where you automatically have to go up 15, 20,000. Now, this is what your buyers are going to ask you, and this is what is incredibly difficult to answer. Well, how high should I go on this? It's tough. I don't know. And I can tell you statistically, we usually see it go here, but what I tell them is, what is the price you can sleep with? Like, what is the price if you go to bed tonight and you got that home? You don't stay up at night saying, I can't believe I paid that. But on the other hand, you're not saying up all night because, man, I should have paid that. Like, what is that number? And here's what I do. That's a football I kick right back to them. Because you can't predict that. They're the ones that have to live with it. They're the ones that have to make the mortgage payment. All you can do is point them back with questions that really get them to really think, what is that number for us? One of my clients over the weekend, their actual offer that they were comfortable with was about 20,000 less than what I advised them and what I told them I thought the home would go for. Fine with that. I would rather than give me a number that and I said to them, okay, do you want to make sure that if this shows up closed a month from now and it's 5,000 more than what you just told me, that you're okay with that because you would not have gone any higher? And they said, yeah, that's it. That's what we're doing. So I said, good. Then that's what we'll do. We'll do it exactly on your timetable. All right. So before we get to buyer broker commission, is any questions on anything else you can do with price? Anybody out there tried something with price that worked for you or that helped you? Yeah.
As opposed to asking for a price reduction, you build in the closing cost to buy down the rate.
Right. There you go.
So you get concessions from the seller, and as opposed to 10,000 off the price, you put that 10,000 towards buying down the rate, and it actually saves more money than the lower price would.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. That's another, by the way, that's another question you should ask your loan officer. How much money does it take to get this rate down to 0.5% or 0.25%? And what does that do to the mortgage payment? Because you're going to find that interest rate has a whole lot more to do with their monthly payment than putting less money down or less money in. So yeah, really having good conversations with your loan officers of saying, okay, my buyer has this much money, or I think we can get this much money from the seller. How do we best use that money? Is that better coming off the price, or is that better going towards our closing costs? Yeah.
I actually brought in an example because I was hoping you were gonna speak about this, and it's exactly what Dave said. This is a client that's putting an offer in today. They're looking at a home, 490,000. With their credit score and 10% down, their rate with no points would be 6.75 today. So their principal and interest would be 28.60. They were thinking about only offering 480. So I ran the payments. That would save them $58 a month. My suggestion to them and the agent was, don't drop the price, but ask for the 10,000 for a rate buy down. We dropped their rate from 675 to 599, and they save $160 a month, more than 3x.
Wow.
Same dollar amount to the seller, right? Because they're either dropping the
Yeah.
price or they're giving it up. But and compared to list price, $219. When affordability is still a problem for us with some of these first time home buyers, being creative with your financing is better than being creative with your price. You're always gonna get more bang for your buck by getting a lower rate versus a lower price.
You see the wisdom in knowing, I used to say that I was a Kentucky Fried Chicken realtor. I do one thing right. I know how to market, show, sell homes. I'm not a lender, I'm not a title company, but you link yourself with good lenders who will give you the time to explain this to you so that when you have enough knowledge to explain it on the surface level to your buyer and then send them to bill. Say, do this. So again, but if you don't even have the knowledge to know that you can do that, then not only are you not serving your clients well, you're not going to be a good realtor. You need to be that realtor that has enough knowledge that the buyer walks away from you going, wow, like I had no idea all this was involved, and they are looking at you as the expert and their consultant, without whom they would not walk through this transaction, without whom they would not be buying a home, and with whom they're going to take your name and give it to other people, okay, because they've learned so much. So again, if you don't have business, you've got time. Use your time wisely to start setting up these meetings, saying, I want to pick your brain. What can I do? What do you suggest? And that's another reason why when your buyer says to you, I'm already pre-approved with this lender, take the time before you make an offer to call that lender. Not all lenders are the same, okay? Not all loan officers are the same. And you want to say to them, okay, I just got a pre-approval letter from you on Joe Smith. Could you tell me your interaction with Joe Smith? Have you pulled a tri-merge credit report? Have you done these things? And often I will do that with my client on the phone. They'll say, yeah, go ahead and tell them, because I want to know, is that just a piece of paper? Or does that loan officer know that buyer? And then you brainstorm, okay, how he or she is looking in an area that is really tight, high demand. What can we do? What are some strategies you can give us when we write that offer so that we make an offer that maximizes what this buyer can do, maximizes their chance for getting a home, and maximizes the value of the money they're putting into the home. So thanks, Bill. That's very good. All right, I want to talk about the next thing on our contract that comes up is the buyer compensation, buyer's agent compensation. Let me ask you this first of all. Just talk to me. Tell me what you're finding. We are a year. What is today? 20th? 4 days. Have our year anniversary of our new world. So tell me what you're finding. Is anybody having to cut their commissions? How are those conversations going? Anyway, yeah.
So I didn't have to cut my commission because we keep asking the sellers to pay it, and it's going just business as usual. The only thing I had just encountered are the investors. As long as the seller is paying the commission, they're fine. Not paying the commission, they will do without you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody as a buyer's agent have a seller refuse to pay their commission?
So I had a thing where we negotiated price. I think the house was at 390. We put it down to 355. Because it was already listed for way more than it was. It had been sitting there for a while. And we concluded the price, everything was perfect except for the commission. Her commission was 1.5. And then mine was also 1.5. I usually do a 3% commission. And we went back and forth, we renegotiated, she went up to 2% for me. Then I think she went to 2.5 for me and cutting hers to 1. Still no 3%, we ended up walking away and getting another property better. Clients loved it, but I got my 3%, so we ended up walking.
Okay,
And then they took the property off the market right after.
okay, so one of the things that muddies the water on this conversation is that a lot of your success as a buyer's agent depends on how smart and good the listing agent is in educating their sellers. Okay, our job as listing agent should be preparing the sellers for paying your 3%. And I don't know about you guys who list, but I do that. I tell them, look, we're gonna go ahead and price your home as if you're paying that 3%. And then when we get the offer, it's a negotiable term, but if they come in at or near what you expected or what's okay with you, then you're good with paying the 3%, right? And I'll say, right. I will tell you, and I list a lot of houses, I don't think I'm trying to think, unless we did it as a strategy, I don't think I've had a seller yet say they wouldn't pay the 3%. So I think we're back to what we always did with more disclosure and more paperwork, but we're largely back to where we were. It starts with educating the seller and the buyer 2 different ways. Number one, it's educating the seller that the buyer has always paid their agent's commission. They just built it into the price of the home. So if we build that agent's commission into the price of your home, you don't mind paying it, right? No, we don't. Okay, let's move on. Then on the buyer end, and I'm going to get down to selling yourself on the front end when you sign this document with them, is educating them that they have always paid you. They've just paid you in the price of the home. And is that what they want to do again? So the other thing I gave you is a form I started using right when these rules changed. And I fill it out with every offer I make, and I sign it and my buyers sign it. And I'm very clear because I'm not an attorney, and Mick always yells at me. This is a cover letter referencing the attached purchase offer. It should not be construed as a legal document or part of the purchase contract. But I'm just explaining to the seller that whatever we offered on your home, in our opinion, includes the 3% purchase into the purchase price. And then I explained very plainly, my client has elected to pay this commission by mortgaging this commitment into the loan. I'm not saying my client is asking you to pay it. I'm saying they are electing to pay it by adding it to the purchase price of the home. My client is asking the seller to pay a 3% buyer concession in the form of contributing 3% to the buyer broker's closing. The offered price on your listing property reflects my client's inclusion of that 3%, regardless of the commission concession offered by your seller. If any, please accept or counter the offer protecting the 3% commission to Keller Williams Greater Columbus. Wow. I don't think I've ever gotten less than, I don't think I've ever gotten less than 3%. Because what you've done with this document is you've walked them through it. You've said, my buyers have agreed to pay 3%. They've elected to build it into the price of the home. They've included that 3% in the price of your home. It reflects what they think your home is worth. We're asking you to agree with that. And if you want to change it, don't change the commission, change the price of the home. Okay, it works every time.
Why
You
are
do
the
it.
sellers sign it?
Huh?
The buyer and the seller sign it.
Seller doesn't, because it's not part of the contract.
Okay, so.
Yeah, the buyer signs it because they are agreeing with this. They're saying to me, yeah, Kathy, this is the way we want to do it. When we signed that exclusive buyer, which is a contract, we discussed it and we said we would rather the seller pay that than come out of pocket. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, remember we had that discussion. Here's this document that is essentially a cover letter to your contract. We're just instructing the seller and the listing agent that this is what you have chosen. We've made it clear to them. So what happens is if the buyer, instead of the seller saying, well, can we cut the commission by 1%, they say, can we raise the price by 3%, I'm sorry, 1 for whatever, and because we've already said, don't cut the commission. Now, they can if they want, but this makes sense, I think, makes sense to everybody, okay? That this is what we want, so I'm giving you permission to steal this. And say, when you make an offer, especially if it's a competitive offer, if you are more and more making offers where there's no other offers on it, I think you'll get 3% every time. Because the seller gets real eager to pay you 3%, but they don't have an offer on their home. But I said this with every offer, and to be honest, I don't know how much longer I'm gonna need to use this. Because everybody's paying 3%, which by the way, is frustrating a whole lot of attorneys in Kansas City. You know, that essentially nothing has changed. So, but I give this to you to copy and plagiarize if you wish, to say, okay, if you're in a situation and you need to have some convincing or what you're doing, this becomes signed by your buyer and it goes as a cover letter on your offer. Now, I want to talk a little bit about earning. Another thing I put on my buyer agreements when I'm talking to my buyers is I always ask, I say, ask for 3%, negotiate later. In other words, when they're signing that exclusive buyer agency, you don't know what home they're gonna buy. You don't know what the seller's gonna do or not. You don't know any of that. But what I do know is I want 3%. So what I tell them is, look, if you will agree with me here that I can get paid 3%, and I can tell you that most of the time the seller's going to pay me for that, you're okay with that, right? Yeah, right, I am. Okay. If we hit a circumstance where that is not possible, I am not going to sacrifice the house on your ability to pay me. We'll negotiate that later. So great, that's fine. So what I'm telling the buyer is, so that way we're not putting 2% or 1.5% or something on that agreement that jeopardizes your income. If you hit a seller that is willing to pay 3%, you're getting 3%. If you hit a bump in the road, negotiate later. Negotiate with the buyer later. The other thing, I wanted to give you a few things you can do to really add your value to the buyer, because you know that's what it comes down to. There's 9,000 of us out there, okay? 9,000 realtors, and virtually every realtor gets into this business starting to work with buyers. So, well, think of that. There's 5,400 homes on the market right now, and there's 9,000 realtors. So half of us have no listings, okay? And of the 4,500 that have houses, I don't know, I know our team has about 15. So, you know, so if all of us have one, that means half of our colleagues don't have any listings. But I'm saying the vast majority of buyers agents out there don't have listings. Okay. So what does that mean? When you don't, if you are a buyer's agent and you don't have listings, what you get very accustomed to is meeting a buyer, sign the agreement, setting them up in the MLS and saying, come see me. Have you sold your value? No, they don't know your value. You're just one of 7,500 agents out there that they could have chosen, and they came across you in some form. So how do you build your value with them? Well, you start by education. You guys should not be going out with a buyer unless you sit down and have a buyer orientation meeting with them, where you're going over. Annie just had one on Sunday. Tell me what you go over in a buyer education meeting.
So I went over what our expectations are, he was really worried about lender and how much it was gonna cost to close. So we went over that, we went over areas that he wanted to look at, we went over how much my commission was, what would happen if sellers wouldn't pay for it. We went over any questions really that they have. This buyer actually was super educated because he went to a class for first time home buyers. And even then, he still had so many questions and I answered them, kind of like eased him down to what it is that we're going into. And most importantly, the process of everything. How much of like time wise and
what starts first, what starts second, how do you get in a house, what times can we look at homes, you know, all of that. A lot that you assume you know, that everyone knows they don't, you know, because you do it. So let me tell you, whether you do it very slick and have a PowerPoint and graphics and all this, or whether it's just a conversation at Panera, that meeting is one of the most valuable times you're going to have with your buyer. Meetings and time equal relationship. The longer you spend with this buyer, the more loyal they are to you and they have a relationship. That's one reason. The other thing is it's just good information. You need to meet expectations. You need to make sure they know what they're doing. You can't just head out, meet them at a house and hope they know all these things. It will protect you when there are bumps in the road. You know, every transaction has bumps in the road. And if Annie did not take the time to sit with this buyer at the beginning, that buyer, I guarantee, is going to say, now, where did I meet her and why am I meeting her? Does she know what she's doing? No, because you established confidence at the beginning of that meeting. So again, if you're not doing that, again, you don't have business, you have time. You should be sitting down and putting together a systematic buyer presentation that says, this is how you buy a house. This is your role. This is my role. These are my partners. This is what we're going to do. And then you sit down with them and go over that with them before you head out and show houses to them. What are you doing? You're bringing value to them. The next thing I do when I set up buyers, this is very important, especially if you have buyers that are looking for something very specific. Whenever I put homes, set up a buyer search in the MLS, I include me to get an email when those homes are listed. Why? Because first of all, it reminds me of that buyer, gives me an opportunity to look at the home and say, oh, that really does look good. Text it to them and say, hey, this came on the market today. I was thinking about you. This looks to have that master bath that you want or whatever it is. It's a constant reminder that they didn't just sign an agreement with you, that you are working for them, that you are out there working for them. Now, are they getting that email? Yes, but I can't tell you how many times I've sold a house to somebody who got the email from another realtor. You know, and that realtor has this set on auto. They think they are representing that buyer, and the buyer calls me and says, you know, I've not signed anything, but this realtor's been sending me stuff, and I just say, well, just let me know what comes up. I mean, you know, just call me, just you do, because that realtor has gone on autopilot. You know, they're just assuming that that buyer is going to call them. Well, that stops when you start being actively engaged with your buyer. When you're being reminded when homes come on the market and you're texting them, calling them, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. I saw this home came up in a neighborhood you want. So do you have interest in seeing it? They say, no, I've looked at it, great, but they had that contact with you. So again, that's one thing. The other thing I do occasionally, not always, but I want to show you this. This is a card. I've done this probably a half dozen times this year. I have a buyer who has a specific need. I want to walk you through this card and tell you the value, what it costs and what the value is to you. First of all, this is designed on Canva. Does everybody have access to Canva or something? Okay. Okay, check that off your list. You got Canva. If you don't know how to use Canva, you don't have business, so you have time. Learn how to use Canva, okay? And so, did Canva, had a client who wants a home on the waterfront. So I designed the card. Then I called my title company and I said, sent them a screenshot of the areas that this particular buyer wanted to live, Alum Creek and Hoover. And I said, would you send me labels for every home in those areas? And it turned out to be 93 homes that were waterfront or near the water. Three, yes.
Have title agents that make sticky address labels like that?
Yeah, 100%. See, you learned something today. So I called my title company and I said, could you send me labels for all these things? 48 hours later, Kathy, the labels are at our front desk, title on East Wilson. I said, by the way, could you send me 3 copies since it's only 93? Could you send me 3 copies? Because I'm going to do this every month for the next few months, sending them out. So they gave me 3 sets, ready printed labels. They've pulled all the addresses based on my specification. I've done it on neighborhoods. I've done it on price ranges. The title company has resources that are amazing to give you that. Then I took this postcard or the design that I had in Canva, and I live 2 minutes from a Staples. I'm telling you, I'm all about time, not money. You could probably do it less expensively. I sent them the Canva thing and I said, give me 300 copies of this postcard. I think at 300, these cost me like 22 cents a piece. Then I go and first class postage for a postcard, 61 cents. So for about a cost of a little over $100 and time, I send out 100 postcards for my first mailing for this house. Now, let me tell you where realtors get it wrong, okay? You think that this postcard is only successful if I get a phone call from someone with a house on the water, okay? I never expect to get a phone call from somebody with a house on the water. I don't care. That's not the purpose of the postcard. If I did get a phone call from someone with a house on the water, I would probably be calling everybody and putting it on Facebook because I'm so shocked that somebody actually responded to a card. So that's not the purpose. The purpose is that I take pictures and send them, text them to my client and say, by the way, wanted to let you know that these are going out 3 times over the next 3 to 4 months to every house on the water in Alum Creek and Hoover. I am their hero. I mean, they, instead of just setting up a search and waiting for that home to come on the market, Kathy is out there actively searching for us. Now, is this value that this is landing in the kitchens of 100 homeowners? Sure, my face, my brand, it's there, okay? Now, here's the next thing I do on this. I put this on social media. It becomes a post in social media, okay? So that people who see on social media, I doubt they have a house on the water. I don't care. What's my purpose for putting it on social media? Let me tell you what should be your purpose, especially those of you who are newer. Those of you who are newer are working your butts off to establish yourself in a new career, representing people buying and selling homes, and your job is daily reminding people that you're a realtor and you no longer work for Chase or you no longer work for Pulte or whatever it is you used to do, you're reminding people. Well, what does a post do? It reminds people that you're in the business. They don't have a house on the water. They're not looking for a house on the water, but they see your face and they say, oh, that reminds me, Clay's a realtor. Reem is a realtor. It's that kind of drip campaign. So what kind of mileage have you gotten out of a $110 investment? You've got postcards at 100 kitchen tables. You've got a thrilled buyer client who sees you working for them, and you've got a social media post that tells everybody who's looking that you are a real, not only are you a realtor, you're a good realtor. You're working on behalf of your client, and you're doing so in a way that exposes either their need or their home to thousands of people. $100, best $100 you could spend to do that. So when you have buyers, it's just a step you can take to differentiate yourself and say, this is why you're paying me to do this. Beyond this wonderful technology, I'm taking this extra step. And by the way, once you have the template done, it's an easy switch. Switch the address, switch the picture, and off and running. Okay? So let's look at some other things here. Any questions about buyer broker compensation? Any questions, anything that's worked, didn't work for you? Okay, I bet if we have this class a year from now, it will not even be a discussion. We'll be right back to where we were. Attorney approval clause. Many of us over this competitive market have stopped putting in any time for attorney approval. Why? Because we wanted to please the seller. We didn't want their decision to be delayed by our buyer needing 3, 5 days, whatever, to put attorney approval in. This is where we go back to doing what attorneys have told us always to do. And that is, you always put in time for an attorney approval. Even if they're not going to use it, you do not want to be caught in a situation where the buyer says, well, I didn't know I had the option to have an attorney. If there is a problem down the road, you want that on your contracts, that they have the time to consult an attorney over the contract they're getting ready to sign. Financing, once again, educate yourself on loans advantageous to your buyer, and we'll belabor that. We've already talked about it. Appraisal contingency, appraisal gap is increasingly not necessary because we're not seeing those offers that are way over list price. I don't know, I haven't written an appraisal gap contract in months, just because the offers on houses are getting closer to list price. less than appraisal danger. And again, is the purchase contract contingent on appraisal? That's virtually always yes. Although I will tell you, in fact, I had an agent who knew I was teaching this class today, called me yesterday and said, can you make sure you remind them all to check one of the boxes? They said, we get offers all the time where the agent has checked either nothing or checked it's not contingent on appraisal because the buyer has said, oh no, it's not contingent on appraisal, without recognizing that that's largely not their choice. That is a lender's choice. That is the amount of money they're putting down. So just again, use due diligence to make sure that you do that. Fixtures and equipment. The seller's market has required that the buyer accept less than premium terms when it comes to chattel and personal property. Your buyer doesn't want the pool table in the basement, but they can't take it out because what if everyone else says they'll take the pool table? Okay, we've ran into that a lot. I would be writing an offer for the buyer and they would say, you know, we really don't want that hot tub that's on the back deck. It doesn't look like it even works. Well, you know, if we ask them to remove it and the other offer doesn't ask them to remove it, then that could cost you the house. So we've had those conversations now for years. Now ask them to remove the hot tub. You know, you have a lot of freedom to begin to really ask your buyers what's important to them. What do they want? What do they don't want? And what gets removed from the house? Now, that also changes your job as a buyer's agent. I'm going to tell you how you should walk through the house. While your buyer is admiring the big kitchen and looking at the granite and all the wonderful things, you should be going through as a detective saying, okay, they're giving me buyer signals. They want this house. So I need to start looking as an agent and saying, what do I make sure that I have in the purchase contract? If they have brackets on the wall in their family room to hold a flat screen television, well, again, in a multiple offer market, we never ask the seller to remove that bracket and repair the wall because we would lose the house. Now you look at it and I say to the buyer, see where this TV is? Is that where you're going to put your TV? No, we'll probably use this wall. Okay, then you make a note. We need to ask the seller to remove the bracket and repair the wall so that it's indistinguishable from all the other walls. We can now ask that. Merry Christmas, okay? Have them do that. Let's say there is, as a buyer's agent, this is my other pet peeve as a buyer's agent, is when your buyer does a home inspection and you get a note from the home inspector that says, we could not see the walls in the basement, we're gonna have to come back. Who pays for that? Usually the buyer has to pay the home inspector again to come out. What should you be looking for as a buyer's agent? You should be walking around the house, and when you get down to the basement and you see that stuff is lined up all along the walls and crammed into the crawl space, then in your language of the contract should be seller to clear all items from the exterior walls in the basement so that all walls are visible for a home inspector, seller to clear the crawl space of all items so that the crawl space can be inspected properly. Buyer's timeframes for the home inspection to begin when seller has notified that that's been done. I haven't been able to write that clause in, again, years, because we didn't want to rock the contract boat. Now, as you're a buyer's agent, you're going to walk through and look at that stuff. Make sure that they can see the walls. Here's the other thing buyer's agents should check on. Attic access. Go into the closet in the hall and the attic access is there. Or you go into the owner's bedroom closet, the attic access is there. That home inspector is not going to move the seller's stuff. So you should automatically be registering, can the home inspector get up there without moving stuff? If they can't, then that goes into your contract. Seller to remove all items from the walk-in closet and by the guest bath. Buyer's timeframes for the home inspection to begin when notified that access is clear. So that your buyer is not penalized and they have to come back and do that. Yes.
Like on the front page of the purchase contract, there's that box that you can type stuff like that into. But if you have a bunch of stuff like that when you're making an offer, you were saying clause, they're like another document you just import that you can write a bunch on.
Yeah.
Attach it to the purchase.
There actually is an additional terms page in our documents list, and it's blank. It just says additional terms, has the address, buyer and seller's name, and a long blank space for additional terms. But the way our new contracts are in the chattel area where it says what stays, what doesn't stay, there's usually room, that's also where I put it in, where I say seller to clear all items so that every wall in the basement is visible to the home inspector, seller to clear the crawl space, all of buyer's timeframes to begin, or buyer's timeframes for the home inspection to begin when notified these items are out of the way. You know, and sure enough, the home inspector shows up and all that stuff in the closet is pulled out and all the stuff in the crawl space is pulled out because we've instructed them to do that in order for your buyer to have the home inspection. And again, that's your job as the buyer's agent to be on the alert when you're walking through a house. Here's the things you look for. You look for TV brackets, you look for any kind of wall hanging that would involve anchors to hold it there. In other words, not just the nails with the picture hanging on there, but those heavy shelves, anything like bookshelves that are anchored to the wall. You should be stopping your buyer and saying, are you gonna want those bookshelves because it looks like they're anchored to the wall? Yeah, we want, okay, good, we'll ask for them. No, we don't want them, okay? You recognize when those are pulled away, number one, it's probably not painted behind there. What do you want the seller to do? Do you want the seller just to leave it because you're gonna paint this room anyway? So you need to have those conversations with the buyer while you're standing there. Bathroom mirrors, you know, if they have the old original builder bathroom mirrors that are on the wall, no problem. But so many people now have hanging mirrors in their bathroom that they picked up at the, you know, home decor store or whatever. Well, legally, those don't stay. They're not fixtures, they're like pictures. So again, you stop your buyer. Do you want these mirrors on the wall? Yeah, they're really pretty. Okay, then those go into the contract, even though they're not permanently attached. Because what you're trying to do is avoiding surprises on the day of walkthrough when all that stuff is gone. You know, well, they took the mirrors, well, they took this, well, they left big holes in the wall. Well, they pulled that stuff out of the garage and there's black mold on the wall. Okay, that's what you're avoiding because you worked for your buyer on the front end to make sure that stuff was cleared out. Looking on the next page here, inspections and tests. One of the things you need to do is really prepare your buyer for a home inspection. This is going to be relative to the home they're buying. There's some homes that are like new, you're not going to have much of a problem. There's other homes that you know going into it, this home inspection is going to be a nightmare. Okay, so especially for younger first-time home buyers, you need to prepare them for the expectation of a home inspection. I've even taken home inspections from other houses and handed it to my home buyer at that orientation meeting and said, I want you to go home and read this because this is typical of a home inspection. When you do your own home inspection, every home looks ugly on paper. So you need to be prepared for that. What I tell my buyers is what you're looking for is any item that had you known about it before you made an offer, you would have not made the offer, or you would have not offered what you did for it. Everything else is off balance. The little things and all that, those are reasonable expectation for a house that's not new, that may need some work. Now, that doesn't mean that you're dictating what your buyer can do or not do, but you are setting expectation. That some of these things you're gonna be a homeowner. Some of these things you're gonna have to live with should be relative to the price you're paying on the home. Let me flip the script a little bit on the listing end. This is one of the reasons why, when I list houses, I do my best to give the buyer the age of the roof, the windows, the heating, the cooling, the hot water heater, the appliances, and on. What am I doing? I'm setting expectation. I have a home going on the market tomorrow that's absolutely beautiful. Everything in the house is 19 years old. It's a 19-year-old home. Everything from the roof, the windows, the heating, cooling, everything is 19 years old. Well maintained, but original. So when I have that's on the sheet, so we have a buyer's agent, you should be asking that stuff so that your buyer doesn't expend $500 for a home inspection just to find out everything's old and they didn't know that and now they don't want the house. You can cover that for them by getting as much of that information as you can from the listing agent, or those of you who are good, is grab your cell phones and when you're walking through the house, go take pictures of the serial number of the air conditioner and the furnace, put it in AI and it will tell you how old it is. So same thing with, in fact, hot water heaters will often have it on there. Hot water heaters will have the manufacture date. and then get what you can from the seller. But I'm just telling you, when I'm walking through a house and they're really liking it and they're talking about an offer, I'm not listening to them. I'm getting my phone out, going to start take pictures of serial numbers. Because I want that information when we go over it. When I list a home, like I am gonna be putting on the market tomorrow, and everything is original, one of the clauses I put in the counter offer, we get an offer on it is, buyer acknowledges that they have received the age of all of the mechanicals in this home prior to making an offer. Seller will not negotiate or compromise after the home inspection on items purely because of their age. So I'm telling the buyer up front, you knew when you made the offer and the price you offered that these were 19-year-old things. Home inspect away, but we are not making any concessions based simply on the age of these things. So part of that is you as a buyer's agent preparing your buyer to have reasonable expectations.
Kathy, you send that as a counter offer?
Yeah. Yeah, so what I'm telling the listing and buyer is that, look, you already know it's old, so don't come back and tell us you want 5,000 off because it's old. You're making this offer knowing that. I'm not gonna go over each of these, but these are all alternatives to straight asking for repairs on a home or not asking for repairs. You can have limited right to remedy, which is buyer reserves the right to a home inspection and termination rights therein. Buyer waives the right to ask for any repairs unless the cost of the individual and specific repair exceeds, and then you fill in the blank, whatever dollar figure's in there. So what you're telling the seller is, we're gonna do a home inspection, we have the right to terminate, but we're not gonna nickel and dime you unless it's something major. Then we'll, by the way, these are good counter offer phrases too. You can, as a seller, go back to the buyer with these. No right to remedy. Buyer reserves the right to a home inspection, termination rights therein. Buyer waives the right to ask for any repairs or ask for concessions of the seller. So if they're not going to ask for anything. And then finally, if someone really wants the house, they really want a home inspection, and if you are in a sense you might be competing, is the right to do a home inspection, the right to terminate, but at loss of their earnest money. If they terminate after they've done the home inspection, they lose their earnest money. So these you could use as a listing agent, as counter offer clauses, but these are things you should open up discussion with your buyer. Don't leave them with their only way is no home inspection or home inspection, no right to ask for repairs, or home inspection and ask for repairs. There's a lot of phrases and nuance in between that can still make your offer attractive, but give the buyer a comfort level that they can move forward.
So we use these clauses for our buyers.
Yeah.
But you're saying that we counter it, you use it as a counter?
Like both.
Seller would use it as a counter?
Both. You should educate your buyer that these are the options they have. Think of any other option, those are all options they have when coming to the home inspection. But I'm telling you as a listing agent, if I get an offer from a buyer, and let's say let's say my house is 450, we have nothing on it, and they offer 410, okay? Well, maybe my seller doesn't care, they want rid of the house. They'll sell it for 410, but they say we're not gonna ask for any repairs. Well, then I put this in here. Then I put in the clause that say, okay, you can do a home inspection, but you can't ask for anything. Or you can do a home inspection, but you can't nickel and dime us. Or you can do a home inspection, but if you back out, we're keeping your earnest money. So it's options either way. My point for today's class is you've got to educate your buyer. You cannot let them drive the vehicle in this phase of the contract. That kills more deals because buyers ask for unreasonable things. Now, again, when I say unreasonable, I understand that there's a wide spectrum of what a buyer thinks is reasonable and not. Your job as a buyer's agent is to educate them as to what is the wide window of being reasonable. When I have someone that tells me that they want every screen on the house replaced, that's not reasonable, okay? You're not buying a new home. And I have buyer's agents say, well, I got to do what they tell me. And I say, no, you don't. You can start educating them. And then they're only asking for reasonable things. Okay. So again, this one section of working with buyers over the home inspection will make or break your career. Because if you do not know how to wisely educate your buyer through a home inspection to allow them to purchase a home reasonably in a comfort level that they have, you're going to be taking buyers up to the edge of the diving board all day long and never closing on a home. Because they've got to, especially older buyers are good. Older buyers don't care. Older buyers want to see if the house is standing. That's it. They're good. But younger buyers generally are just afraid that if they're, I mean, you've seen them on social media where I just have to sit on my hands and not say anything. But they'll have, some realtor will show a picture of a basement with a stair step crack like this and say, my buyer's really worried about this crack. What should I tell them? And I want to say, I'm really worried about you. You need to get out of the business. Okay, if you are worried about a stair step crack that's on every third MI home in the city, you know, then you just need, you need to educate yourself and then educate your buyer. So again, the home inspection is going to be the make or break on a lot of your deals. And it doesn't mean allowing your buyers to purchase a home that is not in good condition. It does mean preparing them that homes are like people. They're all broken in one way or another. It's just what is your level of acceptance based on what you paid for the home and getting them through as easily as you can. The next thing which relate to that is the home warranty. We have forever not asked for home warranties because we did not want to put another burden on the seller. Well, welcome to home warranty land. You can now ask for home warranties and ask for the seller to purchase them. And what does that open? A new opportunity for you to research what are the home warranties out there? What are the ones that are most advantageous to your buyer? Which ones help you? Let me see if I brought it in with me. We just, yesterday at our team meeting, we had, I don't know if I brought it, Mark Purcell with America's Preferred Home Warranty came in, and they have a whole new program where America's Preferred Home Warranty, oh, yay. Thank you. They have a program they're calling Homeowner Concierge Specialist. And if you represent a buyer and their buyer does a home, gets a home warranty through them, they contact that buyer 4 times a year for you. This is Mark Purcell from America's Preferred Home Warranty, and working with Dave Truitt. We wanted to make sure you're satisfied with your home. Any issues we can help clear up. Any questions you have about your home warranty. Again, this is the kind of research you do and say, which one of these home warranties best benefits my client, will do what they said they're going to do, has local representation that can, we have any issues with, and is going to represent me well. This is not a commercial for America's Preferred. I'm just saying that's what's out there. That's what you have to educate yourself on. And because that's now part of your arsenal as a buyer's agent, is to get this for your buyer. So that they can, they can be protected for a year. Any questions on that?
Yeah, typical cost for a home warranty.
They're running now around 500 for buyer and seller coverage. I mean, the seller coverage during the listing period. Some of the alternative, some of the variables are, what is the deductible? If it's a $50 deductible, then the cost of the warranty is going to be higher. If it's $100 deductible, the cost of the warranty is going to be lower. But remember, you're representing the buyer, so you want a warranty that gives them good coverage. The other thing I tell you to look at with these warranties is look at the added coverages. If you're buying a home, your buyer's buying a home that's on well and septic, make sure that you add, even if it's at the buyer's expense, the well and septic coverage. Are they buying a home with a hot tub? Well, there's hot tub coverage. Are they buying a home with a pool where there's, pool pump coverage? So you want to look at that list and at least offer them to your buyer. You don't want your buyer to call 6 months from now and say, is this covered? And then if it were, Mark, you said, I didn't know that was an option. I would have bought it if I knew that it was an option. So you need to know what are optional coverages for your buyer and offer that to them if they want to. Earnest money. Again, this is another thing. Let's first of all talk about very briefly what earnest money is. I call earnest money changing your mind money. It's telling the buyer that if you change your mind on this home outside of a contingency, you're going to lose your money. So A lot of buyers agents right now on offers are not putting in any earnest money. They're saying we're not giving any earnest money because we can't. We can now make an offer. It's not in the buyer's best interest to hand over money, so we're not. Okay, so now I have a differing opinion on that. I think earnest money makes your buyer look like a strong committed buyer, and they should offer it even if they don't have to. But we are entering into a market where it is not absolutely necessary. Well, my son is a young realtor with Revolution and Realty. He goes, Mom, he says, a realtor called me and said that nobody's giving earnest money anymore because it's stupid and there's so many loopholes. They can always get it back, so it's just a bother. So she's not, and he's the listing agent because they're not going to give it. And I said, well, okay, all of that is true. Okay, it is true to a degree, but you still work for the seller. And do you want to explain to the seller if something falls through that you failed to collect any good faith money from this buyer? So number one, you should explain the limits of earnest money to your seller and let them make the choice as to whether they're comfortable moving forward without it. But from a buyer's perspective, what is the positives that earnest money does? Earnest money says we're serious about buying the home, so serious we're putting skin in the game. Earnest money says we have the financial capability to part with $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a month. That makes you look like a stronger buyer. And we will put our money where our mouth is on it. Okay, that's all good when you're handing that off to a seller. The negative is that once earnest money is deposited, if there is any disagreement whatsoever, here's what I tell buyers. I say, once you hand that money to me, I am obligated by law to go straight to my office and turn it in. And once it goes into the Keller Williams escrow account, there's only two ways you're going to get this money back. You're going to get it back if you close on the home, and you're going to get it back if the seller agrees with why you're getting out of the contract. That's it. I cannot give it back to you without that seller's signature if you don't close on the home. So that brings in a world of gray. Okay, there's times when the buyer thinks they are absolutely in the right asking for their money back, and the seller says, no, I'm not signing anything. So I tell buyers, if you don't close on this home, you need to be ready to part with this money for 2 years, because nobody's going to do anything just because you stamp your feet and say and make a good case. I had a situation once where I sold a home, it went in contract. I don't know, it was in the winter, went in contract, and there was snow on the ground. And by the time we closed, the snow had melted. Well, the buyer wanted out because he hadn't seen the ground without the snow. And once he saw the ground without the snow, there was a big manhole cover in the middle of his backyard. And he now said he wasn't going to close and he wanted his money back. Well, my seller said to me, do we have to give his money back? I said, well, let me pull out the contract and see if it says it's contingent on no manhole cover being in the backyard. No, there was no contingency. And so he backed out, he got his earnest money. So again, the seller has to agree with why your buyer's backing out or they don't get their earnest money back. So it is a serious step the buyer's taking. If my buyer wants the house, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to not offer any earnest money, and 9 times out of 10, the listing agent is going to counter asking for it, or they're going to offer earnest money. So it's up to you. It's up to your discussions with your buyer what they want to do. But here's what I would say is our contracts now give you the option of collecting the earnest money up front as soon as it goes into contract or after the home inspection. Now, why is that? I will tell you that one of the biggest reasons are we changed our contracts. We used to not have that in there. It used to always be you had to turn it in as soon as you went into contract. One of the reasons we have it is brokers hate earnest money. I mean, earnest money is a headache. It has to be kept in a separate account. It has a different accounting laws. That's one of the reasons that brokerages get in trouble is by having something wrong with the earnest money. It has to be audited. So brokers said, in fact, a lot of the brokers now, a lot of the agents are now saying, give it to the title company. And the reason they're doing that is because their brokers have said, we don't want to mess with it. We just take that off of our ledger. We don't want to deal with earnest money. So one of the medium ways that the Columbus Board of Realtors said to deal with it is they said, okay, let's still collect earnest money because we see value in it, But one of the biggest reasons earnest money gets collected and given back is the home inspection. So let's put an option in there to say you don't have to turn it in until after the home inspection. All right, as a listing agent, I want that money, I want you to have skin in the game before the home inspection. So I'm gonna be adamant about saying, if you come in and offer home, if I have the market position to do so, and you say you're gonna give me $5,000, but not till after the home inspection, I'm gonna counter back and say I want it before the home inspection. Why? Because buyers do stupid things on the home, buyers change their mind in the home inspection. Which, by the way, not going on, I keep going on rabbit trails. Don't ever, if you're the buyer's agent and your buyer changes their mind during the home inspection time period, don't ever tell the listing agent they changed their mind during the home inspection listing period. Because that is not a contingency. You can get out during the home inspection time period for anything from a trip hazard on the carpet to a chimney falling off, but changing your mind is not in there. So when buyer's agents call me and say, Kathy, I'm just so sorry to tell you this, but they got in there and they decided that the den just doesn't work for them and the bedrooms aren't big enough. They're just growing coal on the house. So we're gonna go ahead and get out. Well, sorry, sorry you told me that, but I work for the seller. And unless you come up with a really good, really good problem with this house, then my seller's gonna have a hard time giving you your earnest money back. So again, the earnest money serves a purpose. What you have to decide as a buyer's agent, number one, educate your buyer. Make sure they know you're not just handing me a check that's going to be clipped to somebody's file. That money's gone. Once you've given it to me, I've turned money into this office and had the buyer change their mind the next day when the check has not been cashed or even taken to the bank yet, and it still has to go through the process once it's turned in. So you need to educate your buyers to that, and then you're gonna measure it on a case-by-case basis. Is it in my buyer's best interest to give earnest money because I want the seller to see them having good faith, skin in the game, and a reason not to walk away? Or has this home been out here for so long that we're not even gonna bother? If they want our offer, they'll take it with no earnest money. Because at the end of the day, it's better for the buyer to have no money in the game and just do their home inspection, walk away. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk very quickly about pros and cons versus title versus brokerage holding earnest money? Because I have been told that the 2-year rule that applies to brokerages does not apply to title because they're in the Department of Commerce and they can hold that check for like, what, 7 years?
I don't know. That's a
Or
good
less.
question that I don't know. Or did someone else know the answer to that?
Well, it depends what the title company wants to do. They're not bound by our earnest money responsibilities.
Correct.
They're listed in our contract, so quite honestly, the deal could fall apart, they're holding the money, the buyer can say, I want it back, and they give it back to them, and since you haven't verified their escrow terms as the listing agent, you're kind of screwed. So that's why I'm like, no, it goes in your brokerage account.
I
You
have
they'll tell you, my brokerage doesn't have one, they have one, they have to, or else they're in violation, and it's a big
I
fine.
have been told the same thing, and I was explained to me that title follows Department of Commerce, not or Department of Insurance.
Yeah,
I was
we're
aware of
Department of
that.
Commerce, yeah.
And therefore, their rules are 7 years versus our 2 years, so
Yeah.
money could get hung up.
This is a really important discussion and a good question, and I have
And
no
it's for
idea.
the market,
We'll find out.
same thing.
Oh, he
Yeah.
did talk.
They'll
yeah.
turn it back if they don't wanna hold it. So if the buyer says, oh, we canceled the contract, all right, we'll have your check out front tomorrow, and it's sitting on the, and they just pick it up. They aren't required of the same hold provisions we are. As in both parties don't have to sign to return it, unless that's the escrow agreement you signed them.
And not most, all title companies, the reputable ones, if you want them to hold earnest money, everybody has to sign a document that says we're holding it and these are the terms that we're holding on. I just wanted you to understand that the reason we now have the split choice for earnest money has more to do with brokers' legalities and not wanting to hold it than it does any option that's for your
And
buyer.
it was short stills too, if you remember, like you'd be in a short still contract for a
Oh,
year
that's
and a
right.
half.
And they'd be
And
holding
then-
money.
But you didn't, if you did that for the inspection, Until the short sale was approved, you didn't do your inspections, so
Right.
that money wasn't stuck in the broker.
Yeah, but it is, the number one reason for return of earnest money is failed home inspections. So part of it's just very practical. Why collect it if it's gonna be given back? Whereas I have listed enough houses to have situations where the buyer backed out on very flimsy reasons. And I thought to myself, if they had 5,000 at stake, they wouldn't have done that. You know, they would have thought twice before doing that. Because I've had homeowners that said, I don't care if it's legal or not, I'm not signing anything. And then you're stuck, money's there, you know, we can't do anything with it because the seller's just refusing to sign a document because they're mad, you know, so. Okay, anything else? Yeah,
If you're offering earnest money as a buyer's agent or recommending to your buyer to offer earnest money, is that usually based on a percentage of the sales price, the amount offered?
yeah, Ohio is miserably low. I mean, Ohio has no requirement. The state of Texas requires 1%, so no matter, that's their minimum. Someone told me North Carolina during this craziness, people were putting up 20 and 25,000 non-refundable earnest money on every house they were buying. So we are miserably low. I would say I like as a listing agent to see 1% of the purchase price, but even a 0.5% I can go with. Like if it's 300,000 and you put 1,500, I'm good. Where you really get in trouble is that you get into the lower end of $250,000 homes and you see 500 in earnest money. That's hardly worth the process. So I would say it needs to start in the thousands just to be worthwhile doing. Other than that, it's like, you know, pocket change. It's not worth the paperwork. And when I'm sitting with homeowners and I look at the earnest money, they'll often look at me and say, is this enough? And my question is it enough for you? If this buyer backs out, and I one time had a homeowner say, well, I'd like to cover one mortgage payment. Okay, how much is that? Okay, that's what we'll ask for. So again, it is real money and it has real consequences, both for the seller and the buyer if the buyer backs out. So the seller, I tell the buyer, this is to compensate the seller for taking their home off the market for you. So we want it to be enough money that the seller feels compensated, that if you back out, they're not gonna turn around and sue you. They're gonna get compensation in some form for taking their home off the market. Yeah,
I will say since about middle of July, every contract I've gotten, either no earnest money or earnest money to be collected after home inspection.
yeah,
And then low, and one of them was $250.
yeah. That's not what you do in a buyer's market. No, you start it when it becomes your choice. It's not in the buyer's interest to have any money at stake. So you have to look at your buyer. But again, I'm telling you, most good listing agents are going to discuss it. It's another thing, and this goes back to not making any decisions for your clients. What you want to do is advise them and let them make a decision. But I have this discussion with my homeowners when they say to me, well, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, what would be satisfactory to you? And then we discuss it and we come up with a term so that they've made that decision. But often I will almost always counter and ask for some level of earnest money. And the only exception to that is if it's cash and we're closing in 10 days. It's not worth collecting it because we won't have time to process it and get it back. So, but if it's a mortgage on a normal closing, then, you know, we're going to usually counter and ask for that. Clause 14.4, the Ohio Sex Offender Registry. I'll just tell you what I do with my clients when they're sitting with me, whether we're on Zoom or we're in office, whatever we're doing. I pull up the screen of the Delaware Franklin County Sheriff's Office and we pull up the house and we look at the sex offender registry. I want them to see where the sex offender, I first tell them while I'm putting in the address, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm just telling you right now, there will be sex offenders. The question is not, are there sex offenders? The question is, are they within the distance from your home that you're comfortable with? That's what we're looking. And so I'll go on screen with them. I'll invite them even to go on and do a deeper dive if they want and look up the names and see what the people did and all that. But basically I want them to see a visual that here's their house and here's the sex offenders. Now, why do I do that? Because most agents skip right over that. It is a buyer beware issue. It is public record. It is all those things. But why do they hire you? They hire you because you know that it is a simple search with Franklin or any county sheriff's office to get that list. And that's one more value you bring to them as a buyer's agent. I did that once and there was a sex offender next door and they said, we're out. Now, what if I hadn't searched and what if they didn't search? Okay, now, even though it's buyer beware, even though they should have done it, don't kid me to think they wouldn't come back to me and say, how come you didn't know that? Like, how come you let us buy a house with a tier 3 sex offender living next door? So don't skip over that as just language on the contract. That's a time to stop, pull it up, let them visually see where those sex offenders are and say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm gonna leave that to your decision. You wanna take time and look at these, but from what I'm looking, the closest sex offender is 6 blocks away over here. And they'll usually say, no, we're good, you know, we're okay. As long as it isn't next door, we're good, but that's your obligation as the buyer to make sure they're aware that isn't, the seller does not have to disclose it. I've had buyers say to me, well, doesn't the seller have to disclose that to us? No, the state of Ohio long ago determined that the seller has the right not to stigmatize their own property. So the seller doesn't have to tell you anything. It is a public record situation. The buyer has the obligation to check. And as the buyer's agent, you should make sure they know that. And if possible, practically from where they are, you should you go over that with them. And I'm going to assume you guys are better than this, but just to throw this out there, you should not ever be sending 16 pages of documents over to a buyer and saying, sign them. You should in some form, either by Zoom, on the phone. I've had people on the phone while we're both looking at the same, or in person, in some form, you should be going over these contracts with them. If you're not, you are in my opinion, it's malpractice. Because they are signing documents that they're going to be legally bound to, subject to be sued over, and cost them a whole lot of money. And if all you're doing is shooting them a document and say, here, sign where .loop says to sign, then you're setting yourself up for being in trouble. I had a closing recently where the seller, I'm gonna say that, not that it hasn't, that happened to me, this is the reason I know to tell you this, because it's happened to me. But in this case, I was on vacation. And especially because I work with a lot of older people. And so one of my homes went in contract while I was on vacation. One of my team members went over, you know, sent the documents over to the woman to sign. And at closing, she swore she did not offer a home warranty. I mean, it was simple. It was just a home warranty. She goes, no, I never would have done that. And I said, well, Karen, it says right here, you know, you signed it. And she wouldn't drop it. It still bugged her. So we ended up paying for the home warranty because when I got to the bottom of it, I found out it was done over the phone. She really never saw the contract. She just discussed it with the agent and then they sent over a counter offer. Well, that sets you up for buying refrigerators and curtains and home warranties because there's something to be said for going over every clause and saying, this is what you're signing. When you are looking this over. Okay, real quickly, closing. Just a quick tip of yes.
Okay, just a quick question about the sex offender.
Uh-huh.
If you are aware that there's a sex offender, do you not have to tell the buyers or any other buyers?
If I'm the buyer's agent,
Well, no.
or you as the listing agent.
So you have a previous buyer, you found out somebody's on Franklin Street,
Yes,
and then 3 weeks later, you have a whole different buyers and you're taking them to Franklin Street. Do you not have to let them know?
yes. If you represent the buyer,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, to me, that's part of your buyer advocacy.
But
Is to
you know,
say, huh?
you know it, you're not required to search it.
Yeah,
If you know they're there,
Yeah.
anything.
Well, that's what I'm
You
saying.
have
As
to-
soon as you research and you find that out, now you gotta tell everybody you take into the neighborhood that, you know,
Yeah.
Steve over here was
Yeah.
in a parking lot after a football game.
Yeah.
You know.
no, I absolutely, I'll tell you 2 stories worth. One, I represented as a buyer 2 years ago, a registered sex offender. Talk about a problem. Because any neighborhood, he could only look at houses that were so many feet from schools and all of this stuff. And then, like, now, I think he was a very nice sex offender. In other words, it was 15 years ago and I felt completely safe with him. I actually felt very sorry for him when I saw what he goes through just to live every day. But he moved in and had bricks thrown through his window within a week. of moving into his house. He lived on a cul-de-sac. He had to go house to house and introduce himself, say, ask any question you want, look me up, do whatever, but I'm your neighbor and I just want to live in peace. Just, leave it. So that's an issue. I had another situation where this is many years ago, but if you want to know where the hot pocket of sex offenders is, it's a lot of them in Blackfoot States over in sort of the Bryce and Reynoldsburg area. Anyway, it's because there's a lot of rentals over there, so landlords don't care, they just rent to anyone.
Right.
But anyway, so I was listing a house there and the seller said to me, my next door neighbor is a sex offender. I just want to let you know that. Is that a problem? Well, it's not a disclosure issue for the seller. They're not required to, but I remember calling Joe Baroni and saying, am I required to, representing the seller? And Joe said, you can only do what they instruct you to do. You're only, and if you are not comfortable with that, then you don't list the home. In other words, you can't have the seller say, I don't want anyone to know, and you go and, tell list buyer's agents. Because I had a moral and ethical dilemma of someone, and it was a bad sex offender. And I thought, what if a mom with 3 girls moves in, and I'd let that happen knowing that there was this person living here. So I went back to the seller and said, Mr. Seller, I'm just going to tell you right now, I want to work for you, and I think I do a good job, but I cannot in good conscience let a buyer buy this home without knowing who your neighbor is. And they kind of said, well, okay, how should we handle it? And what Joe suggested that we do was to put in the agent to agent remarks to ask seller for extenuating circumstances or something like that, or ask listing agent. So buyer's agents would call me and I would say, I just want to let you know there is a registered sex offender living next door. You can look it up, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's Blackfoot States. It's every third house. So anyway, we finally got, and it's funny because I used as an example to my seller, I said, I would not want a single mom with 3 girls moving in here and not knowing that. I said, I that would bother me. I can't do that. So sure enough, we get an offer from a single mom with 2 daughters, but mom lives with them too. So 4 women. So I tell the realtor, I said, I need, she called me, hey, I saw your notes in the MLS. And I told her, and she's gonna remember, I'll never forget, the realtor said, oh, is that all it is? She goes, yeah, they know, they're all over, they're fine with that. And I'm thinking, this is a single mom with 2 girls and her mother, and they're fine with that. But again, so the point is that yes, you would have to let any buyer know, and even as a listing agent, you're on thin ice if you list a home, because it is not the seller's obligation to tell. But according to what I've been advised as the listing agent, then you have to decide, can you live with that, or would you just rather not take the listing? So
You document that somewhere.
Huh?
You document that conversation somewhere.
I don't remember, that happened so long ago, I don't remember if we put it into, I think, and it maybe not that one case, but I've had cases since then that I put in the counter offer that buyer has been advised of, whatever it is that's, going on. Because it's, could be an issue. My point for the class today is it's often a skip over clause that you don't even pay attention to, and that can come back to bite you. So don't skip it over. Make sure you go over that with your buyer. In fact, before you even sit down to do the offer, look it up yourself. So you know what's coming. You could say, look, I've looked it up. Doesn't look like there's any sex offenders near you, but just want to make sure you're comfortable. Here's where they, here's where they are. All right, closing. Quick tip here, try avoiding the last 3 days of the business days of the month. That's what all buyers do. And that's when lenders get booked up, title companies get booked up. Life is so much easier if you close the 22nd, 23rd, or 24th rather than the 29th, 30th, or 31st. So it makes so little difference to the buyer generally. With so much little money difference to the buyer, it makes everybody's lives easier. The other thing I say, when you are writing your offer, stop before you put in a closing date and ask your buyer, what are the easiest days for you to take off work? Or do you have any days of the week that you can take off work? One of the more frustrating things that I deal with, and title companies will tell you this as well, is that the buyer says, well, we can only close 5 or later. Well, title companies work 8 to 5, okay? So when you sit down with your buyer, prepare them that they are going to have to take off work. And is there a day of the week or is there a time of day that works best for them, and then put your closing date? Well, she's off on Tuesdays and I can get off early. Good, then let's pick a Tuesday. That's when we're going to close. So make that part of your discussion so that you don't have a mess at the end. And then, again, prepare them for needing to take off during the day. Possession after closing, getting ready to wrap it up here, I'll hurry up. Another big mistake I see buyers agents make is allowing possession after closing without a written agreement on the terms of that possession. Now, I'll even give you a break and say, if they're closing on a Friday and possession's Monday, maybe you don't want to go through this, but I'm telling you that this agreement, the occupancy after transfer of title agreement, which, by the way, the reason we don't call it a lease agreement is because if we do, then the seller falls under tenant landlord law and it could take 90 days to get them out of the house. So we don't call it that. We call it an occupancy after transfer of title agreement. It is a courtesy agreement between the buyer and the seller that underscores the terms under which the seller is allowed to stay in that home after the buyer owns it. It is so important. Not often do things come into play, but when they come into play, you're glad you had something in writing. Beyond, are they going to pay for it? What happens if someone gouges the wall bringing bed frames down the stairs? What happens if someone's kid accidentally makes a dent in the garage door during that 30 days possession of the home? Who pays utilities? Do you still pay the condo fees? Whatever it is. And then the main thing in here is it does require the seller to get renter's insurance during the time they're in the home. So when buyers say, well, gosh, they're living in my home, what if something breaks? I tell them that's the risk of allowing possession after closing, is that someone else is living in your home. That's the reason attorneys hate it. That's the reason insurance people hate it. So let's mitigate the damage by having a document that covers the high points. How long can you be there? When do you have to be out? You're going to pay utilities. You're responsible for negligent damage. You're going to get renter's insurance. You're going to keep the utilities in your name, and you're going to leave the home clean and free of any personal items and debris when you vacate the property. Those are the things that are covered by this agreement. Do you have a question back here? Yeah. That are covered by this agreement that you'll be glad are there. Let me tell you what I've had happen during possession. I've had lightning strike a home. I've had the air conditioner go out. I had a situation 2 summers ago where my client got 60 days in the home after closing. Well, that happened to go into the summer and her air conditioner went out. Well, the buyer said, the buyer's shopping around for the best person to come look at it's their responsibility. They own the home now. My seller wanted to call Joe, who always worked on her air conditioner. I said, Sarah, you can't call Joe. It's not your house. Well, when are they going to be here? I don't know. The buyer's calling around checking. Well, it's hot. It's 92 degrees. Sarah, I'm sorry, but you don't own the house, you know? Now, if you want at your expense to go fix the air conditioner, I'll ask the buyer. They'll probably let you do that. But it's his house. He has the prerogative to get who he wants in, when he wants them in there, and give approval for whatever repairs he wants to do. It's his house. So that's the kind of things that this agreement is going to save you the headache, because they've signed agreeing to that. It also says if they are not out when they're supposed to be, that the seller has, or the buyer rather, has the right to use whatever legal means to get them out, and they have to pay the buyer's attorney's fees. So you hope it doesn't come to that. I've never had it come to that, but you certainly hope it doesn't come to that and you don't have anything in writing. So take advantage of the documents that are available to you. I know this is in our .loop, but I think Keller Williams also has a version of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had that in reverse. I never ever allow pre-possession. This
Oh.
is not something I want to do. This was a special case. Her loan was delayed, the seller had repairs to make, blah, 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 blah. They said, and she called the seller. Seller said, we'll let her live there, we'll let her live there for free, it's partially our fault. Now, what do we do? I said, well, I want a lease. So we put the lease together. And the two things in the lease were like, number one and number two, you will pay all utilities. You will take care of servicing the grass and all that stuff. So for the last 15 days, she has not turned utilities on in her name, and she's calling him every day, the grass is. So she needed an extension because the loan still isn't ready to close, and I said, well, we'll give you the extension, but I want back money for the utilities, I want
Yeah.
back money
Oh,
for the
it's a
grass, we
nightmare.
had to cut, oh,
You just don't want, it's just, it's like Nancy Reagan on drugs, just say no. Just say no, no, we're not gonna do that, yeah.
I have a quick question about the post office, or post
Yeah.
closing. When do you present this? Do you present it with the purchase contract?
Oh, good question.
Or after the contract?
Oh, no, it's gotta be, she was asking, when do you get this signed? I make it part of the purchase contract, so when I am, making the offer and asking for post-closing possession, I have in additional terms, occupancy after transfer of title agreement is attached to this purchase contract, shall be a part of this purchase contract with all signatures received. So that way the seller can't sign the contract but not sign the occupancy. They go together and sometimes even that, a lot of times if I'll work with the other agent and I say, look, before I fill this out, when can they be out and what are we doing? So I try to go ahead and put the dates in that are acceptable to the seller. But you're absolutely right. One of my agents on my team years ago, when she was real new, she came to me and she said, Kathy, we've got the contract signed, but the seller won't sign that occupancy agreement. And I said, well, didn't you put it in the contract that it was part of the contract? She said, no. And I said, well, they have no obligation to. You are now in contract on a home with undecided terms on occupancy because you did not marry the two. You didn't put the two together so that the seller signs one, they have to sign the other. Yes.
So now that we're in this different market, I think what I'm gonna start doing with post occupancy, asking for $1,000 at minimum to be held back in escrow
Yeah.
for damages or things
Very
that
good.
weren't in the contract that now are all of a sudden gone.
Right.
Now you can do that.
Yeah, that should have been on the list. You're absolutely right. For years, we've not had the ability of putting any leverage or weight on the seller to abide by the terms that they agree to. But what Ann is saying now, when you're representing a buyer, and the seller wants possession after closing, that you add language that says, okay, we'll give you that possession, but based on how much stuff they have and all that, we want you to escrow $5,000 so that when we show up, the home's in good shape, all the stuff is gone, all of that, and once we see the home's in good shape, we notify the title company, you get your money back.
Does the title company agree?
Huh?
Does the title company?
Yeah, it should, they will put out an escrow agreement that they'll hold that money. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify, did you say we don't have to use this if it's a weekend, but if it's more than 3-4 days, you would recommend?
I would say if I'm an attorney, I'm gonna say it should be for 5 minutes. Because anything can happen even
Sure.
over a weekend.
Right.
But I do understand from practical purposes.
Right.
That realtors don't wanna go through all this for 2 days, possession of a home. But and so I leave that up to you, but what we've seen in the past is automatically 30 days or 60 days or whatever. And for you to let your buyer, let a seller stay in the home for more than 2 days without having this signed in some form is irresponsible. Because then you're gonna get the phone call that the air conditioner broke. Then there's nothing that says who does what, and the seller's gonna say it's not my problem, they're living there, and the buyer's gonna say it's not my problem, it's your house, and you're gonna end up buying an air conditioner. So again, this agreement's very simple, it's very plain, it does just the bare basics of the obligations, but it solves a lot of problems. When there is a problem, you have something in writing, and to allow your buyer to purchase a home and allow extended possession without protecting them with this is gonna bite you.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, I would say a home warranty can be a little challenging with these.
Mhm.
Because the seller provided a home warranty, they had 60 days post possession. Air conditioner goes out,
Yeah.
of course. The seller was gonna call and have them come out. Well, seller coverage was lapsed, the buyer had to call them, come out and meet them at the house, because they wouldn't let the seller let them in.
Isn't that crazy? Well, but it's the buyer's house, you know? Yeah, it's the buyer's house. Which, by the way, is when talking about home warranties, is the reason to find a good one, stick with a good one and get a good sales rep. The sales rep is gonna be your best friend. When you need them to do you favors, when there's a gray area, if you have been a good customer to the sales rep, they'll go to bat for you to help you do that. All right, thank you, everybody.